After 70 years, India is going to see a mega indirect tax reform, that is goods and services tax. Nearly 50% of the required number of states have ratified the GST bill. India is on the threshold of setting up the most powerful body to administer the goods and services tax. Yes, the government will soon notify the GST Council that will make all the vital decisions for the smooth functioning of the goods and services tax. Or it could create some chaos too. The GST Council will bring the centre and the states with representatives from different political parties on the same platform. This unique body will make critical recommendations on the GST rate, the exemption threshold, and dispute resolution mechanism. How will these crucial decisions be processed and implemented? Is Parliament going to clear each recommendation? How will the disputes be resolved? Watch this exclusive discussion, which is bound to get heated, only on TIOLTUBE.com.
Hello and welcome to Simply inTAXicating. We are back with one more episode on GST. A rapidly moving and evolving indirect tax reform in India. In a record time of 23 days, as many as 16 states have ratified the Constitutional Amendment Bill, paving the way for introduction of GST. The bill is all set to be sent to the Rashtrapati Bhavan for the presidential assent, and probably after the cabinet approval, the government is going to notify the constitution of the GST Council. The GST Council is going to be the most powerful federal body, which was described by the Union Finance Minister, Mr. Arun Jaitley, as something which is going to be testimony to the fact or a phenomenon called doctrine of pooled sovereignty. It's a new principle which was floated. So GST Council, what will be the configuration, the kind of function, the kind of role, the kind of power it is going to exercise to discharge its duty, although it's going to be recommendatory in nature. We will discuss how this is going to work. We have three distinguished noted experts with us, constitutional experts, indirect tax experts, and also one expert who has made as many as 6-7 budgets with different finance ministers. So we have Prof S Sachidhanandam, former Vice Chancellor of Tamil Nadu, Dr. Ambedkar Law University, and a visiting professor to National Law University, Delhi. We have Mr. T R Rustagi, who is former Joint Secretary, T R Rustagi, Ministry of Finance, and a person who has made several budgets with several finance ministers. And we have Mr. Pratik, Jain, National Leader, PricewaterhouseCoopers, our knowledge partner for this episode, rather a series of episodes we are going to come up with in coming days. So let me start with Pratik. The GST Council is going to be a reality very soon. I am hoping that probably by September end. So can you list out a few challenges for the GST Council?
Yes, so let's start with the mechanism of GST Council, which is now there is part of the bill. So Article 279A talks about of the proposed bill, talks about the setting up of a GST Council, and once the Constitution is amended, the President will notify setting up the GST Council. GST Council will have a power to decide multiple things, the rate of tax, the Model Law Act and rules, and how the compensation to the states has to be given, an entire framework or structure of GST. It will have representation from all the states, so all the state finance minister or any other nominated sort of minister will be part of the council,
yeah,
and the union finance minister.
Right.
The other and more important part is that any decision which is to be taken will be taken with 3/4 majority of the people, present voting,
right,
and 1/3 of will be central vote and 2/3 would be state vote. So that would mean that any decision which has to be taken can neither be vetoed by the center,
right, nor by
the state.
Right.
That means that without center's concurrence, it is not possible.
Right.
Now, it is possible that some of the states may not be in concurrence, but still amendment goes through because out of two, you just need a total 3/4.
Right.
Now the challenges before the council, one is that it is a recommendatory body, And therefore, when it says the GST Council shall recommend,
Right.
is it binding? I mean, industry is hoping that it is considered as binding while it is not there in the constitution, because
Right.
if each state decides to have its own, let's say rate of tax and own provision, then the whole benefit of GST and the creation of
Will be
common
lost.
market will
Right.
be lost.
Right.
The second challenge which I see is the mechanism that they are supposed to set up under sub-article 11 of 279A.
Right.
It says that they can decide a mechanism to dispute, to resolve the disputes between two states or center or state. And there the challenge is that even if they set up that dispute resolution body, there are articles of the constitution like Article 226 and 136, etc., which wherein the states or center can go to High Court or Supreme Court. So how that mechanism will deal with that, or that mechanism will coexist with the existing articles of the constitution is a challenge. I think the biggest from a corporate India perspective is it binding or is it recommendatory? And if it is recommendatory, are we going to look at different laws, different provision, different rate of tax in different states?
So, sir, what exactly your experience tells you, sir? As you rightly suggested, that as per the law, as per the constitution, the body's recommendation is going to be recommendatory only. But industry is hoping that it should be binding. Only then, there can be perhaps some shades of uniformity. Otherwise, what will happen is we will go back to 2006-07 like the bat. Different states are having different kind of rates, different kind of exemptions, no uniformity in the practice, various kind of provisions. So what is your experience, sir? I mean, as per law, it need not be binding, but in practice, it could be binding.
I look at it,
Right,
the way the GST is being introduced in this country. You are changing the course of history actually. You are not introducing a new tax, you are changing the history itself.
True, sir.
And it has been debated for a very long time in this country, for 10 years, 13 years. And the way the consensus is coming now, so far as the central government and the state governments is coming, it is presuming lot of things in the making of this constitutional amendment.
Right, sir.
And in the implementation of this constitutional amendment. The fundamental presumption is that now a time has come when you should not waste time unnecessarily in the center and the state in every day creating problems, every day creating disputes. You create a tax which a tax can be implemented easily, which tax can give you more revenue. It is a buoyant kind of a tax. So with that kind of an approach, there is a virtual consensus which is coming between the center and the states that will work together and will take decisions on the basis of consensus. That is why, if you read these provisions, both the center and the states have got veto power.
Yes.
Because it is 3/4 and then 1/3 and 2/3 weightage is
right.
So I see it that way, that they are presuming that there will be a consensus because a lot of debate has gone into. People are realizing now the merits of GST, which they were not realizing till yesterday. Today, everybody realizes, whether you take the academic, whether you take the institutions, whether you take industry, whether you take common man, everybody wants GST.
Right, sir.
So people are conscious what is GST. So the politicians, the legislators, they have to be conscious of that, that it is an important thing which we are introducing, and therefore we cannot create a situation where every day there will be problem between the center and the state governments.
Right, sir.
So that is the way I look at it.
Well, I just want to add here one. So I think as far as center is concerned, I don't see too much of an issue because of two reasons. One is if center doesn't want, they don't give the vote, the decision can't be taken. So they can veto it at the decision-making stage itself.
Decision, right.
Well, the states have 2/3 majority, but there could be a situation that there are 3 or 4 states who are not agreeing with a particular decision. And that I think is the real challenge. Those 3 or 4 states don't implement the recommendation of the council. And I think that possibility does exist. However, if you look at the constitution, there are certain provisions where it is a recommendation. For example, Article 280, which says that the Finance Commission shall recommend to the President about the way allocation of revenues will happen in different states. But till now, I think in history of independent India, we haven't seen where a recommendation has not been accepted.
Right.
So I think it is also the central government machinery is more geared up to accept the recommendations. I'm not very sure about the states, and particularly states who vote against a particular decision, whether they are going to follow that decision or not.
I mean, how do you look at a situation like this, as for instance, Tamil Nadu, or maybe even West Bengal, which has which had a special session of the House but did not ratify it. So there can be a scenario where a couple of states are playing truant.
That means if a state not comply with the decision of then it is a dispute. Then you have to refer to the dispute mechanism.
Okay.
That will resolve the problem. Actually, what I see, this GST Council is broadly speaking, it is composition is political in nature, and it will be continuous monitoring body, continuous monitoring the health of the economy, and from time to time there's a supreme policy making, and whatever may be the 3/4 majority or veto power of the center, it is more of deliberative, and as my friend said, it is consensus is presupposed.
Right.
And if at all a dispute disagreement because 1/4 may not agree, or like Tamil Nadu, then they may have to refer to the dispute mechanism, and that will be a quasi-judicial.
There's one point there. I mean, if the GST Council recommends something and one particular state does not follow, that does not automatically become a dispute, because the mechanism which has to be set up is if there is a dispute between center and states, or between states. So if the GST Council has a dispute with a state, that is not covered in the mechanism, unless then the central government actually raises a formal dispute saying, look, the particular state is not accepting and therefore there is a dispute.
Dispute could be like this. You may have, suppose you recommend a band as a GST Council. Some state says, I go above the band. Because the power of making the law is still with the center and the state government.
Right, so correct.
So a state government deliberately says that I don't follow this band.
Right.
Band is suppose 5 to 7%. But some state government says I will impose 8%.
Right.
Because they have the power.
They have the power.
But that does not become a dispute, because dispute is only
that
between
can
two
be a
states.
dispute between one state and the other state.
Yes.
Other state may take it as a dispute that no, you cannot go beyond this.
Right.
So that kind of disputes will have to be settled by a mechanism. We do not know exactly what is the mechanism, because it only says that GST Council shall establish a mechanism.
Right.
So what is that mechanism? The details are yet not known.
So you have some precedents where some sort of mechanism has been sort of formed or created in the past. For instance, this water dispute between Karnataka and Tamil Nadu.
Yes, a tribunal,
right?
A water tribunal.
Whether similar kind of tribunal can be created?
Can be created naturally, because unless that mechanism endowed with the judicial power, that is what we call in legal language quasi-judicial power, to deal with that, you can't resolve the dispute. Naturally, that mechanism should be a body endowed with judicial power, and we call it as a quasi-judicial power. That will alone can decide the dispute.
But that was done by the parliament. Again, one has to go to the parliament.
No, not necessarily, because there is a provision that the council itself create a mechanism.
But the mechanism has to get the power first, sir. How they are going to settle
now the council is already empowered to create a mechanism.
Council is
empowered. Already council is
only
empowered.
settle the mechanism, but the power has to come from somewhere.
No, the power is coming by this constitutional amendment.
Constitutional amendment.
It says that the council shall establish a mechanism.
They have not talked about the original jurisdiction of how the High Court or Supreme Court perhaps.
No, there is no need for going to original jurisdiction.
So then, sir, why not to go to interstate council? Why to create another tribunal?
No, interstate council, it is of different subject matter.
But it can be, sir, always modified, for instance, because that's a council which is already in existence.
This will be a specialized kind of
specialized kind. It is a specialized kind.
Interstate council, they do
all kinds.
Yes. This requires different attention, a special body required.
And you may require specialists.
Specialists.
Who have understanding of technical.
So, this is the consensus, sir. This can be created. There is no problem. GST Council had the power to waste power in this. But this will be a purely judicial body, sir.
It should be.
It can be.
Headed by either, retired
Supreme Court judges.
Or maybe Chief Justice of High Court.
What I feel is that mechanism, what they anticipate is only a quasi-judicial body.
And there could be different bodies set up for different kind of disputes. So you have a dispute between center and state.
Right.
You have two states. you have center and more than one state on one hand.
Yes.
So they may actually set up
It
different
can
bodies.
happen. For example, I may have one rule for supply of services or place of supply, because the legislative power is with me as center and the state. So the council may recommend that for a certain service, this will be taken as the place of supply of that service. But one state government may differ that no, in my rule I will change it, I will make that as the supply. So there can be a dispute of this kind.
Right.
So
Because
that
another
kind of
question is, as rightly suggested, that for instance, GST Council is going to vet the model GST law, CGST, IGST and SGST.
it is recommendatory.
It's a regulatory.
Yes.
Now, it's not necessary for all the state to stick to that model law.
No.
It is not necessary.
So, there can be a
there can be deviation.
deviation from that.
But that is the
so
point.
that is where the industry is worried.
That is the point
from
I'm
corporate
making. That is
perspective.
the point I'm making, that they are presuming that most of the states,
Will stick
they
to
will agree with the recommendation of the council. If there is any difference of opinion, definitely they will discuss within the council itself
they will, right?
before they make a deviation in their
Right,
law.
correct.
So they are presuming that if somebody has a difference of opinion, suppose a place of supply,
Right,
you have a difference of opinion. West Bengal says that no, for this service this should be the place of supply. Some other state says that this service this should be the place of supply.
Right, sir.
So the forum of council is for that purpose only, to bring about a consensus.
And also, I think the way it is implemented today is that the draft law which was formed, which has been released, is not only a central government initiative, right? So you have state
Correct.
and center were jointly doing it. So once a place of supply has been decided by this law, which is a consensus-based thing, but I think I'm only worried about, and I don't think it's a problem with all the states who have voted in favor.
Right.
It's not a problem with the center. It could be a problem with few states which have not voted in favor, and I just hope that as part of the mechanism, they would have some special sort of attention to that specific case where the states were not voted do something, and industry would also hope that it is expeditious. I mean, it's a speedy resolution.
Right.
Although at some level, I think it will also happen if there are 3 states who do not follow. And I think industry will also put in a lot of pressure on them, as to start following it, because
Some sense will prevail, I think.
some sense will prevail over.
Hopefully, sir. I mean, it should. I mean, that is where otherwise it will eat away the whole shades of uniformity in the whole one market, one India. That thing is gone in that case. So, I mean, the other points which in this context comes to our mind is, for instance, a state like Tamil Nadu decides, whoever the chief minister is today, tomorrow, decides to grant certain local items exemption. Now the question is, when it comes to computation of compensation, so Tamil Nadu will always prefer that I should be compensated 100% as promised in the Constitution Amendment Bill by the center, but it's a local decision. A chief minister is taking a decision to exempt certain items completely perhaps on some political grounds. But now the question is, this will be another area of dispute between the center and the states. So, don't you think the GST Council should have a clear-cut, transparent parameters how they are going to calculate the revenue loss if it has to be compensated? Because this is one area which will perhaps take them away from consensus also, sir. If some of the states are aggrieved that I am not fully compensated, they will perhaps not stick to the GST Council some of the recommendations which are in any case recommendatory, it's not mandatory. So, I mean, do you think, sir, do you visualize this kind of issues?
The council will have to decide that what is the base for that, for determining that there has to be compensation. So, that base they will decide first, that so far as the states are concerned, they have to agree that this is the amount of revenue which you should get ordinarily, even if GST is not there.
Right.
Then,
sir.
if they agree upon that, after that the question of compensation will arise. So, this revenue neutral rate concept is inbuilt in their working process itself, that when they recommend the rates of GST, they will definitely take into account that normally this should be pegged at the revenue neutral rate, so that the compensation is minimum and things are going like smoothly. It cannot be a situation that the compensation will be more than what the states are collecting already. So that cannot be the situation. Maybe in some cases there could be a case for compensation for some state or the other. But by and large, they will have to take the revenue neutral rate into account, that what are you collecting today, what you are collecting for the last 10 years, what is your presumption in the in the next 5 years, how much you will collect.
Right.
If on that basis there is some shortage of revenue, then the question of compensation will arise. So revenue neutral rate concept or revenue neutral rate exercise is inbuilt in their entire exercise of recommending the rates to the parliament or to the state legislature.
Right. You wanted to add something here?
No, I mean, I agree with what sir is saying. I think ultimately the GST Council will decide the mechanism for compensation. I just hope that there is, I mean, perhaps it would have been a good idea to have a deterrent in the bill for those states who are not following the recommendation of the council.
Right.
So to say that if the states are not following the recommendation of the council, then they would have power to, let's say, reduce their compensation, things like that. As of now, there is no deterrent. Okay, I mean, of course, one will have to look at whether the industry would put pressure. One will have to look at how the dispute resolution can be expedited. But how do you ensure that dispute in the first place is minimized? That states follow the recommendations of the GST Council. I think there enough thought has not perhaps been given.
Not gone into.
And that I think is again a problem. And perhaps the GST Council, as soon as it's formed, should try and set up a mechanism. And they have power under this thing that they can decide any other matter which concerning GST.
Right.
So they can perhaps decide a mechanism that if the states or even center, I mean, I don't think there's a possibility much, but if the states are not following the recommendation of the council, then how will it be dealt with? Because that technically not a dispute between two states.
Right.
That is technically a violation
of
the recommendation.
Yes.
So can there be some deterrent that they can bring in here by setting up a specific mechanism? I think that will be very important.
So
that will create a friction. If you say we have to wait for our experience, you can't straight away anticipate that the recommendations the states will not follow, or in case it doesn't follow, you suggest some deterrence. And in the beginning itself, if we put any deterrence, it will create a friction and problem. But let us have some experience after some time.
Any further amendment.
Further things, deterrent you can think of only at later stage, not in the beginning itself, anticipating that you want to follow the recommendation, therefore we are putting it like that. Then that will be create a starting trouble itself.
Creating deterrence, you have to go back to the constitution.
No, not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
No, what I'm
Not
saying
necessary.
is there is a provision
And
which
within the
says
GST Council.
that they can decide any other matter relating to GST as the council may decide.
Yes.
So they can decide that this is a matter of a concern, that a recommendation of the council may not be followed by a center or the state. If that is the case, then these are A, B, C. These are the mechanism. This is a mechanism which shall be followed. I don't know whether deterrent is a good idea, but there has to be there has to be some proactive thinking. Of course, we will learn with the experience, but whether suddenly there are 5 states not following, if there are major states like Tamil Nadu you mentioned, then
what will happen, sir, in a scenario like this, that 5 states are not following it? So what will happen, sir, if 5 states not following and GST Council in any case is accommodating? Perhaps they will reduce, maybe they can have a decision that let's reduce the compensation to them. And compensation, because the center has to compensate as per the amendments of 5 years, 100% compensation. So they are losing revenue because of their own act, not because of what is happening as per the GST Council.
They may take a view that you are not following our recommendation, that is why you are losing so much money.
Right.
Absolutely. Not give you compensation to that extent. So state will be compelled to accept it then.
So then, so the whole issue again, there will be a legal dispute. The center and maybe the GST Council versus the states, maybe it's a different scenario. So one has to go to Article 131 original jurisdiction. I mean, it's going to be but there can be a situation like this, sir.
No,
I mean, even today, we don't have 100% support to this. We don't have 100% support, sir. I mean, consensus you said, sir, but certainly not 100%, in toto, all the support. It's not there.
And this compensation also is only for 5 years. So
only for 5 years.
Any mechanism that you have to look at as a deterrent has to be for, not only for 5 years in that sense.
Even in the compensation power, they have a clause, Parliament shall by law on the recommendation of the GST Council, provide for compensation.
Yes, sir.
Law may say that
Yes.
if you don't agree with the recommendation of the GST Council on rate,
Right.
will reduce your compensation to that
Compensation,
extent.
yes, right.
In fact,
correct.
is this additional duty of excise and customs,
Sir.
there was a provision that if some state still levies tax on these articles like textiles, etc., they will not be given the compensation. They will not be given the share of the
Yes, sir.
AED.
Right.
So they have a provision like that. You never know. They may make
They
such
may have
provision
some
in
more
the law
provision,
itself.
right, absolutely.
So then the states will be compelled to follow the recommendation of the GST Council.
Right, sir. So, I mean, on this note, I would like to wrap up and thank all my guests for wonderful contribution. We have talked about the baby which is yet to be born. It's likely to be notified by this month end. Of course, a lot of challenges are going to be there for this. The major concern from industry perspective, the taxpayer perspective is going to be that if there are a few states which have perhaps committed today, but if they back out tomorrow, what will happen? How the GST Council is going to ensure uniformity in the practices. In fact, the band has been agreed upon. So, if there is going to be a band operates, if there is going to be a little difference between two states, that itself is going to impact the way the business is going to be planned in the GST regime. So, non-complying with the GST provision or maybe the tax rate or maybe other legal provisions, that will create a serious issue for the industry and trade which are having all India presence and doing business in different states. So, naturally all those issues, hopefully the GST Council will have the necessary power to sort out all kinds of disputes between the center and other disputes, and as sir rightly suggested, Mr. Rustagi, that the compensation perhaps can be reduced if somebody is not complying with the GST the recommendations. So, I mean, it will be directory in nature, but since there is political consensus, it is being hoped largely that what Mr. Jaitley described as full sovereignty, everybody will comply with it. Everybody is hoping that India should become one market, one nation. So, on this note, on a very positive note, let's hope that the GST is born quickly and some of the vital decisions like GST legislation, the model law, the rules, etc., all those things are finalized quickly so that a lot of uncertainties which are prevailing in the market could be removed and some more meaningful feedback could go back to the, the center and the states. Thanking you all for watching TIOL TUBE, and let me thank Pratik and PwC for their support, for providing a lot of research input and making it very meaningful for us. We hope to bring some more meaningful episodes in future when the GST is finally rolled out. Thanking you all for watching TIOL TUBE. Thank you, sir.